Welcome, advocates, to another episode of the Lead in Equity podcast that focuses on supporting educators with the tools and resources necessary to ensure equity at their schools. Today's special guest is Dr. Michelle Seijas. So without further ado, Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to a good conversation.
Let's do it. So before we get into today's topic, I'd love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you currently do.
So I am based in LA now, and I am an executive coach for leaders mostly in the education nonprofit space. And I support folks with finding value in their strengths, growing their confidence, having a clear vision for their life and leadership, and finding sustainability on their leadership journey. And so I do that through one-on-one coaching, group coaching, and through speaking.
All right. Group coaching, speaking, one-on-one coaching. I'm excited because, any type of leadership type of conversations, I learned myself, my own selfish side of things as an administrator. And then I know it's very helpful for our school administrators. But folks, if you are aspiring, and even if you're not aspiring, I don't want you to tune out because, I'm a teacher and I have no desire. I think these conversations today are going to be relevant to you as well. So I want you to hang in there as we have this discussion. So I want to ask you in regards to leadership, we talk about self-care, make sure that you have a self-care plan and make sure that in case you get overwhelmed, because these leadership jobs can be very stressful. There's a lot that comes along with it, a lot of responsibilities, a lot of staff that you might have to support, all these things. But I want to see if we can add on to your general self-care type of rituals or routines. What else are some things that we could be mindful of when it comes to burnout and avoiding those kind of burnout situations?
Yeah. So as a former teacher and former high school principal, we are taught and we're praised for being people who work 110%, 150%. And so, as a young teacher, I went in and I was wanting to do the weekends. I was doing home visits every night after work and all those things, which is beautiful. Built amazing relationships, great stuff with kids. But it also meant that kept getting patted on the back for that. And then it was like, well, you should go be an administrator because, you give it 110%. So over the years, it was like I kept leaning in more and more. And at some point, it's going to break. And so I had to, at one point, I left K-12 space and ended up transitioning into nonprofit, which also is a lot of giving of self. And at one point, finally had to sit and reflect on what is it going to look like long-term to be able to still be in this work, but not having to pivot because things become unsustainable. And so what I've learned along the way, I've done a ton of work around this now, is that there's this whole aspect of self-care we don't talk about, which is actually our nervous system's somatics and being able to actually engage our body in the process. And so now the work that I do with leaders and with, sites is helping them to understand how our bodies actually contribute to the stress that we're experiencing and how we can actually work with our bodies to reduce stress. And so I think the next level for folks when they're like, I got the massage and I'm still not chill, is there's likely some type of getting into your body practice, which I'm sure I can get more into as we keep chatting, that's going to really make the difference for folks.
Let me go back because you got me thinking, I know there's this optic that's there. It's like, okay, you're the school leader, so you should be the first one, opening up the school. You should be the last one. And kind of like you mentioned, you almost traumatized me when you started talking about the home visits right after and all. It's like, yeah. And then not to mention your own home, right? If you got kids, if you're married, you got partner, whatever you have situation, there's the home responsibilities in addition to the work, but then you're like, oh, I have to be a certain way as the school leader, or otherwise my staff aren't going to respect me or students aren't going to respect me. Why do you think there's so my question is, why do you think there's such a stress or a feeling of obligation outside of your responsibilities when it comes to your presence and just being in those spaces like that?
Yeah. I mean, we get into this because we care so deeply, right? I am a child of the Central Valley of California. Maternal grandparents were farm workers. When I became a teacher, I was a bilingual ed teacher in a predominantly migrant community, going back and serving in communities I was used to. So a lot of us get into this work, choose the neighborhoods, the types of schools we work in because of our own background, what we care about, which means we're going to want to give 110%. And the system loves to take advantage of that. So the part that we have to be very cognizant of is understanding why we're there, but also thinking long-term to, if we really truly want to have impact, I want to make sure that I have clear thinking every time I step into that classroom, or clear thinking every time I step on my campus or wherever you're at, to be able to engage in this work. And so what I've learned over the years is there's a lot of things that start to happen over the years that accumulate. So for example, because somebody like me chooses to work in a largely migrant population, later I worked in an urban school district, there's a lot of secondary trauma. There's our own stuff. I will say, the nonprofit work I did was with leaders of color. And a lot of times you would hear people sharing that there was traumas that they had happened in their own schooling time that was being re-triggered as an adult because they're now seeing kids going through it, or maybe they're re-experiencing some of that. You add on to that maybe stuff like, for example, the first high school I was a principal at, we had a foster home down the street, and it was a home full of, young boys who were in foster care. We're working with homelessness. We're working with a lot of things that, even though I am not homeless, I start to experience some level of that through secondary trauma. So that can start to add. I'm being maybe re-triggered from things from my own past. I'm starting to carry some of what the folks that I serve are bringing into the classroom or to my site, my office each day. And then we start to get empathic distress. We care so deeply, but when you care deeply and you're not seeing enough change, it starts to weigh on you that you actually are so empathetic. So I am showing up every day for 15 years, 20 years, folks who are really dedicated to the profession. And I'm not seeing enough significant change. I'm still seeing the same data that Black and brown kids are not reading at the levels that they should be. I'm still not seeing enough kids getting into college and finishing college, whatever the data is that you're looking at on a regular basis. And so you can start to get empathic distress where you almost become desensitized. And so you see some of those folks who've been around for a very long time who kind of almost have to shut off to continue to survive and be in the space. So there's all these different ways that the way that we're engaging with the communities that we're in start to impact us, whether it be mentally, spiritually, physically. And so that's where we have to be able to get into it deeper than just, I'm just going to turn off the phone this weekend, because there's likely a lot more that's sitting on you that you've been carrying for a week or maybe a couple years, maybe 15 years if you've been in your profession for a long enough time.
Okay. So I remember a few years ago, I had a guest on my show, and their name unfortunately escapes me right now, but we talked about compassion fatigue. And I remember asking her, well, how do you switch off? Right. So you just dealt with, like you said, some homelessness, maybe some other challenges, maybe some other issues, especially like COVID. I know there was very stressful for a lot of administrators who were trying to work with families that are dealing with stuff. And I said, when you leave the campus and you're headed home, like, how do you transition over? And she talked about like maybe some strategies that you can do in your car on your way home, especially if you got a longer commute. Those kind of things are helpful. So I'm curious on your end, like, what are some strategies that we can do to kind of decompress and kind of transition over, so we're not necessarily feeling like robots and just feeling like we don't have any sort of empathy, but at the same time, we're still protecting ourselves.
Yeah. So I'll get into a little bit of science here, and then I'll get into some technical stuff. So when we think about our bodies, Resum, if you've ever read, I highly recommend, always tell people, I really think folks should read My Grandmother's Hands. And the term that he uses in the book is metabolizing our energy. And so if you think about, if you were to go to work or just exist in your life and you're eating breakfast, you eat lunch, you eat dinner, and all day long, you are not allowed to go to the bathroom at all, you'd be uncomfortable by the end of the day. If you 2 days later, you'd be probably starting to feel some pain. By the end of the week, you're probably going to end up at the hospital because your body is just like struggling to not release. In the same way that we have to physically release from our bodies, we have to energetically release from our bodies. So when we are, for example, I'm navigating, maybe I had to file a CPS report, and now I have to navigate the CPS person who came for Child Protective Services. I'm also engaging with the family. I'm wanting to take care of the student. You're kind of navigating all these things as a leader or even as the teacher. And as you're navigating all of that, you're getting a little bit of maybe the stress and frustration of the CPS worker. You're getting the fear of the child. You're getting the anger, maybe from the parent. All of those emotions are energetically in some way attaching to you. And so you have to think about, how can I metabolize this energy? So at the end, I actually like people to do this periodically throughout the day, but if things are busy, maybe it's just a beginning of the day and end of the day practice, is we need to start becoming in tune with our bodies to notice when we start to have something catch on to us. And what I mean by that is starting off with even just a body scan. Can I take 2 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, and just breathe? If you feel comfortable closing your eyes or find something to look at, and just start to just really notice what's happening in your body. Ooh, my right shoulder is like really high up. Let me like actually drop this for a second. Keep scanning through. I've actually got a pain in my hip. I wonder if that means something. My feet are feeling really sore. We just actually don't even know a lot of times what's actually happening in our body. So part of it is, can we scan and just even feel sensation? Another one is naming feelings. When I usually do workshops with this, I literally give people a feelings wheel, and you can just Google feelings wheel, and there's tons of them you can find online. And I'll tell folks, can you put this in a place? Because a lot of us don't even know how to name the feelings that we're experiencing. We just know how to name a lot of the action words related to what's happening. And so if I take a moment and pause, you know what? After that meeting I just had, I'm actually feeling very anxious. Can I sit with that anxious feeling for a minute and see what it's about? And there's research that's been done that says that it actually only takes our bodies up to 90 seconds to feel a feeling. But a lot of times, because we repress it and we keep putting it aside because we just don't want to deal with it, that's why then you're stuck in bed for 3 days and you're overwhelmed and you can't get up and all those other things. It's because your body actually didn't know how to just let it flow through for 90 seconds. So if you could actually periodically throughout the day check in with yourself, what am I feeling? What's happening in my body? Likely you can start to find practices that work for you, whether it's take a walk, deep breathing. Again, my grandmother's hands has a whole section about exercise you can do. There's tons of stuff you can find online these days. Some sort of a somatic practice that works for you, 1 to 2 minutes, and then we can go on. If we do that periodically throughout the day or throughout our week, you're giving little bits of release. But what happens for most of us is we never acknowledge what our body's feeling. We never acknowledge any feelings that we've kind of caught from things that happened. And then we're 5 years down the road and we're like, I just can't do this anymore. And then we move on.
Got you. Okay. How do we deal with, because I'm just thinking, I'm the kind of person that would do a body scan, for example, and get stressed out because my body hurts. And so I'm like, why is my body hurting? Or I'm doing the naming feelings. I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling this way, feeling this. And I get stressed out about those kind of things. Or I get anxiety because of my body scan. And that was my feeling. So what strategies do you have for people like myself who might get stressed out over those strategies that we're trying?
I feel you. I work with a lot of high achievers and you are a high achiever. So with high achievers, it's like, what's the thing I need to do and how can I do it the best I can do and all that kind of stuff, right? I have so many leaders I'll get on a call with in coaching and they'll be like, okay, so I'm going to set aside 30 minutes. I'm like, stop. No, you're not. You don't even have 30 minutes in your day, but it's like we feel this need to automatically assume we're going to do the best version of the thing. So that's why I say 1 to 2 minutes and figure out what works for you. So there's stuff I've done in the past I don't do anymore. There's stuff I do now that I never could have done when I was a principal because I just didn't have time for it. So as a principal, I boxed. So I actually found a boxing gym in downtown. I would get out of work. I would go to this boxing gym. I haven't boxed in like 10 years. But at the time for me, like it was like this physical thing where like I just needed to get something out, right? Especially as a young woman of color in leadership, and especially in like the high school world, there was just a lot of stuff I had to kind of like, the code switch, to hold it together, the things you can't just say and do even though you're thinking them. And that became a way for me to just like get out whatever couldn't get out during the day. Now it's a very different practice for me as a coach. I go to a yoga studio that's down the street from my house. I like to do yin yoga, which is like a meditative yoga. I go 4 times a week. That's now become the way that I can just kind of process and move things. So we each just need to explore until we find the thing that makes the most sense to us at that time in our lives and related to what we're doing. If being quiet and still is not your jam, don't be quiet and still. Go for a run, go touch grass. I mean, there's all this science on just being in nature. Go touch a tree. Maybe you're planting stuff. I was just chatting with a friend of mine who was like, I signed up for a cooking class. I'm going to start cooking more. Cooking will be something for me to do at the end of the day to just give myself some release, some place to just kind of process the day without having to just be focused on maybe like a meditation. So I think the thing is, don't assume it has to be the best perfect. I'm going to get an A+ at it. And it could be something small and just explore and figure out what's best for you. Which is why I love to give people like a menu of options and lots of different books to consider when I do workshops and stuff, because it's going to look drastically different for every single person in that room. We just need to figure out what works for you. And it's probably going to be totally different than what works for me.
Okay. Thank you. Because yes, I would be the one who's grading myself and, I forgot to do my daily scan yesterday. I didn't do it on Wednesday. Like I would keep track and that would stress me out that I'm not following these things. So it sounds like what I'm hearing is Michelle, is got to give yourself a little bit of grace with your self-care or how you kind of regulate yourself.
Yes. I love that you use that word. I actually use that word when I close out set workshops, because people then again start making these plans. They're like, I got this. I'm going to do all this stuff every day next week. And then life happens, right? We have to give ourselves grace. Also, I really am not a fan of using the word healing. Okay. I'm committed to, I'm going to be doing this till the day I die. I'm 46 years old. There's a lot of accumulated stress, generational trauma, my own personal trauma stuff, whatever things that have happened in my life that I'm always processing, thinking about, engaging with. And it's just a life choice. So if I didn't get it right this week, I've actually been traveling for the past month on and off. I've been to yoga maybe twice. I was traveling. I enjoyed myself. It's time for me to kind of like slowly start to get back into the ritual. I got to enjoy myself in a different way for the past few weeks. So grace is a big part of this, because you don't want to give up on it. You want to just keep navigating and allowing yourself new places to explore, try something new. I forgot about it this week. I'll pick it back up again, maybe at least one day next week.
Okay. Okay. So if I'm trying something new, what would you recommend And again, I know it depends on the person and all that, but what would you recommend would be enough time to say, you know what, that wasn't for me? Let's say I wanted to pick up boxing. And I go to boxing practice and I get hit in the stomach a few times and then, you know what, this ain't for me. Do you suggest do I come back a few more times? Did you give enough chance, like enough time? Maybe you will come around. Like, because sometimes if it's a new activity, hobby, whatever it is, there might be a level of frustration because you're learning. So what would you say are some of the things that we should be mindful of, and in regards to how much time we're giving for a new activity or new something that we're wanting to add on to our lives?
I mean, I would say in general, I always tell folks, like, be checking in on what you're passionate about. If
Mhm.
you don't want to do it, it's probably not the one for you. But like I will say, I crave going to my yoga class. And when I miss it, I can feel it in my body. I don't miss not going to boxing anymore. That season's passed. So just start again. It's just like, how can you get curious and aware of yourself? If you're noticing I'm forcing myself to have to do this every day, that's not the one for you. If you're starting to notice, ooh, I missed it, or hey, I kind of wish I would have done a little bit longer today, chances are you're on the route to something that feels good that you're going to want to do on a regular basis. You know, I'm going to be real. I'm not a regular meditator. You know, a lot of folks just assume I must do it every day. I mean, it's part of my yoga practice, but it's different. And so I sometimes just kind of let it go for a while, but then I'll notice if my body's craving it more. I will say in the current state of where we are in the world, I do it now every single morning before I get out of bed. But before that, it'd probably been years since I'd been that dedicated to the practice. So just notice, what are you actually craving? What does your body want more of? And if you're resisting or you're not wanting to really do it, it's probably not the practice for you.
Okay, well, that makes sense. Do you recommend, and again, I know everyone's different, but do you recommend maybe okay, let me back up. The question I want to ask is because I know what I would like. So I'm trying to be I told you before we when we first started this conversation, like some of this is for me. So let me be a little bit more general because I was getting too much for Sheldon's sake. Do you recommend keeping track of what the process that you're going through, maybe your daily checks, your feelings, what do you call it, the name feelings, or other activities that you recommend some sort of keeping track? And if so, what mediums or platforms do you have in regards to keeping track of your progress?
Very much a personality thing. So competition is in my top 5 strengths. To me, anything that gets me a medal, an award, a sticker on the wall, like if I was in kindergarten still, all that stuff appeals to me.
Okay.
So so for me, it can be as basic as I literally have a calendar up here. It's just like a basic square thing. And I love to be able to put a post on there to say, like, I did the thing, I did it this many times, whatnot. That's just something that fuels me. I also live and die by my calendar. If it's not on the calendar, I will completely forget that it's supposed to happen. So I tell folks, do you need to start plugging in? Just put it on your calendar so you look at it, you remember. Is it an alarm on your phone? I don't tend to use a lot of apps for this, but I know somebody I work with found the I Am app, and you can actually type in meditations or notes to yourself throughout the day. And so they were like, that feels worth it to me. I think they pay like $1 a month, and it'll pop up affirmations, things they want to remember or maybe sit with throughout the day. So there's all kinds of different ways you can figure out what kind of helps you. But I would say at a minimum, start putting it on your calendar. So basic example I'll give you, this actually was a perfect example somebody gave in a workshop, is usually at the end, I'll have them actually make a plan for somatics and whatnot. Somebody said, actually, this has nothing to do with work. I have to go to the dentist next week. And the dentist makes me so anxious. So they said, I am going to put on my calendar that I'm actually going to leave early to the appointment so that I can sit in the parking lot for at least 5 minutes before I walk in to do a breathing exercise, or maybe play some chill music on the drive there and then do a breathing exercise. That'll be my check-in with my body. How's my body feeling walking into this appointment? Then afterwards, I'm not going to have something to rush to. I'm going to give myself a little bit of a buffer so I can sit in my car again after the appointment, check in. Is my heart racing? Am I kind of freaked out a little bit? Do I need to do something to kind of bring myself down? And then head to the next thing. So they were going to actually plan it on the calendar, not the exact time for the appointment, but a buffer on both ends so they could get there a little early, 5 minutes or so, and then stay a little late and then head out. So it could just start off by just calendaring it until it gets to a practice where you're just used to it all the time and you automatically do it. Put it on the calendar for now. Stick a little, like I said, the feelings chart. I know folks who tell me they literally tape it next to their desk so they just remember to look at it periodically throughout the day. Whatever is just going to help it be top of mind for you until it becomes an automatic practice.
Got you. Okay. Okay. So let's transition maybe to the science side of things. What happens to your brain when you are doing these type of things, like your checks, your activities, whatever it is? Talk to us about that side of things.
Yeah. So our bodies are made to keep us alive. That's why we still exist. So a lot of that comes from our nervous system. And so our bodies, way back in the day, everybody's heard this example, right? Like We used to be able to train to run away from a lion. We don't need to run away from lions anymore, but our body still wants to do that.
Holy
And that's
cow.
because our nervous system was just assume we're always going to be dying. And I will tell you, if you really, when I'm coaching people, I'm like, let's follow that train of thought. Because a lot of times we cut it off and we keep going. Somebody, let's say, says something like, this is an actual example of a conversation, something imposter syndrome. I'll be like, stop. I don't like using the word imposter syndrome. I want to really dig in. Let's drill into what happened, because we just put that label on things and try to move on. Something had happened in a meeting. We break it down. Well, this thing happened in the meeting. Everybody in the room had an Ivy League degree except for me. They were using some words I actually didn't know. Oh, then where was your brain going? Well, I started thinking, if my boss is listening to them and I'm not saying those words, or I start thinking they know I don't have an Ivy League degree, could I get fired? Oh, well, what would happen if you got fired? Well, then it would be really hard for me to pay my bills. What happens if you don't pay your bills? If you follow the train of thought, it usually ends with, I'm going to be homeless. I'm not going to have food. I'm going to die. So our bodies, in these moments when we think it's like a simple feeling like, oh, I had a moment of imposter syndrome, or, if you really follow that train of thought, it always somehow gets to, I'm going to not have a home and I'm not going to have food and I'm going to die. So our bodies are constantly going there. The more we become aware of what's happening in our bodies, checking in, we're noticing where that spiral is going so we can readjust our body. So my grandmother came here, as I mentioned, maternal grandmother, farm worker. She came with a coyote, undocumented, crossed the Rio with little kids back in the day. She literally needed to survive and help babies to survive. Then my mom worked 2-3 jobs when I was growing up. My mom needed to function in a way of survival for herself and for us. I'm a woman with a lot of degrees who's had lots of professional jobs, and I still have my own level of survival, but it's nowhere near that level. But that's what lives within me, and I'm still functioning as if I'm like my grandmother trying to cross the Rio. So we have to readjust our bodies to know we're not in these survival scenarios that we have been ingrained genetically or just societally to believe. So part of this is you're retraining. There's this nerve that runs from the back of your brain all the way through your body, and it touches all your organs. It's called your vagus nerve. That nerve is what's triggered. Your heart's palpitating, that nerve touches your heart. When we say things like, oh, I feel that in my gut, or my gut's telling me, guess what? The nerve touches your gut. So this nerve is running through our body. What you're doing when you're doing somatics or you're breathing or doing any of this stuff is you're retraining that nerve to not always assume I'm going to die. So what you're doing is when you're doing a somatic exercise, you're telling your body, oh, that thing that you think is actually life or death is not life or death in this moment. Let's calm down so I can be calm and I can be clear. So you're taking yourself out of fight mode or flight mode or freeze mode. And instead you're training your body to be able to, and actually I shouldn't even be doing it straight. It's still a wavy line. Stress is just part of life. You're teaching your body to live here and to not be doing all of this fight mode, freeze mode, because we're constantly feeling like we're in survival. So what you're doing scientifically is retraining your body to understand what it means to live in 2025 and to not be going through all the things our ancestors and other experiences we've had in our life have trained us to believe were going to take us to death.
Whew. Michelle, yeah, how much you charge? I need to. We need to talk offline at some point, man, because you're bringing the fire today. Do you have a book out? Do you have any? This is off topic. I'm just curious now.
No, actually, funny enough, I was just talking about this. So something I'm exploring right now is, so I do these workshops, people do their plans, they do all this stuff. There's tons of books out there, right? Like you can get The Body Keeps the Score. You can get My Grandmother's Hands. I can give you a list of books to get. The Body Says No is the latest one I read, absolutely obsessed with. But what I've been thinking a lot about is what would it look like for people to actually have a place to process all of this, to map out, to do. So I think the need is more of what does it look like for leaders to have, I guess I'll call it a journal, so to speak, to actually be able to learn, good teachers, learn a little snippet. So you don't need a whole book. Maybe you just need 5 pages, 3 pages, little snippet of the learning. Try it out this week. Here's a place where you can map it out, try it out, reflect on how it went. Here's another little snippet. Try it out this week. So I think the need that I'm seeing right now is some type of a journal that leaders can engage with, as opposed to another book to read, because there's tons they can already read. But I think leaders just need to be able to make it practical. People just need to be able to make it practical. So that's the thing I'll come back when I've got it and it's ready to be on the market. But that's the thing I'm playing around with right now.
So like a workbook type of thing, like a journal, or?
Yeah, kind of like I'm envisioning a mix between a book and a journal with short chapters and then opportunity for application. You kind of feel good about that. Let's move to the next level. And then some opportunity for maybe like some coaching kind of embedded in there along the way.
Got you. Okay. All right, cool. Well, yeah, let me know when you got it, because I'll be the first one. I want a signed copy as well. So
you got it.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I heard you say the vagus nerve. I remember learning about that a few years ago, and they talked about taking cold showers. And so I had this whole thing for like about a month. I would take a cold shower. It was crazy, but I could tell the difference. So talk to us a little bit more about you touched on how it's connected to all our guts, but why should we want, not your guts, your organs?
The
So
guts is part of it. That's part of it.
why should we activate this? Why is it so important to make sure that vagus nerve is activated, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, a part of it is just, especially as leaders, or even if you're a teacher in a classroom, you got a lot going on with little bodies moving around, or even you got big bodies if you're at a high school. And so we want to always be coming from like this clear place. Like I mentioned at the beginning, part of the work I do with my coaching is helping people have a clear vision.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times, especially with the way things are right now, people hop on a call and I can just see the spinning and I'm like, slow down. Do we need to take a breath before we actually get into this conversation? Do we need to somehow ground ourselves because you are spinning? And you know, as a leader, you've got 3,000 people who have an opinion about what you should be doing. So when you're hearing from 3,000 people, you're getting this feeling, your own personal feelings about stuff. Again, maybe we're triggered from our own stuff from the past or stuff we're experiencing with our students. You want to be able to be in a clear mind to make decisions and do things. The way to get there is to actually be able to lower that nerve to a place of calm. So for me, I say, it's actually interesting how your nervous system go-tos changes, life changes. If in Spanish, we call it which means I was usually in fight mode, right? So don't you dare come for my kids. Don't you dare come for my school. Don't you like I would tend to go into fight mode more than anything else. The protector part of me as a principal, as a leader. There's other people who go into freeze mode. They shut down. They don't talk in meetings. They stop applying for the promotions or whatnot. That's because we're in some sort of a survival mode. I'm fighting to get my voice heard, or I am flight mode. I just get out of there. I just don't even want to deal with it. Or we freeze. If we can actually learn how to engage with that vagus nerve, we're coming from a more clear place. We're able to get grounded. So there's times when I'll end a call with a client and at the beginning it was the spinning. And at the end, they're like, oh yeah, this is why I wanted this job. This is what matters to me the most. These are the values that are being ignored by what everybody else wants. And this is what I need to put forth. There's a clarity that comes when you can slow down, take a breath, and actually reconnect with why you're even doing the thing that you're doing. So if I think of the best reason for a leader is because you want to make sure that you are impactful, right? You want to make sure that you're doing the things that brought you there. Even as a teacher, there's a reason that you ended up there. If we want to get back to our why, if we want to stay grounded in that, we have to be able to find some calm. And we're not going to find that calm if we're just letting our stress and our body take us in all the directions. And I'm going to cuss this person out. And then I have to call out sick for 3 days and all this stuff. That's what happens when we don't actually take the time to calm this vagus nerve or to engage it in some way to actually serve us now and not serve us in ways that actually just are not relevant to the life that we're living right now.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think it's easy to, not easy, but I think part of this conversation has been like taking care of ourselves as a whole. However, in some of your examples, I heard you mention like maybe someone had to have a difficult conversation with an individual, or they had like in that moment. So there's those things that happen that could stress us out. What type of strategies can you give for, let's say I got to have a difficult conversation or with a parent or with a staff member who we tend to butt heads. And so I just don't like dealing with them. So like, can you give us something like in that moment that we can do that can kind of talks in line with what you've been saying today?
Yeah. I think oftentimes we think some of this stuff just shows up, but we already know what parent's going to be mad at us. We already know what student is probably going to come in and I'm going to have to reset myself to be able to like love on that kid and be able to be available to them. There's a lot of things we already know. I know if I go hang out with my family, somebody's going to say something that's going to upset me that I'm not going to be able to forget. So I think it goes to the calendaring piece. If we can actually slow down every now and then, again, this isn't a huge amount of time, maybe a few minutes. I scan my calendar. Ooh, I already know Wednesday, that 8 a.m. What can I do at 7:55 before that 8 a.m. starts? Or can I block at 9 o'clock to just take 5 minutes because I'm going to have to release a little bit of whatever is pent up energy from that meeting, that situation. We can probably already scan and predict and plan ahead for some of those things. And what I hear some people say sometimes is, you know what? Actually, you're right. And what I usually do is I spin out all week in preparation for that Wednesday call instead of actually just planning to take 5 minutes to do some sort of a breathing somatic practice to prep for it. Instead, we just let our minds spin out already knowing what's coming. So plan ahead when possible. Along with that, I think to what I just said, a lot of times we go into those, and if you're already going into it in that survival mind state, it's just not going to make it a good situation. So if folks are wanting to prepare for something, I actually do a nervous system map where we'll sit down together and actually map out. We already know. So I'm 46. I know what's going to put me in fight mode. I already know what's going to make me go to flight mode, whatnot. So we'll actually map out in advance. What are the things that tend to put you in these different buckets? What triggers it? When do these things tend to happen? What are the things that we can now plan in advance that you're going to start doing on a regular basis before or after? that you know are going to help to restabilize you if you're going to be kind of in and out. So I think our experience is a lot more predictable than we assume or that we give credit for. So I think plan for what you can. And again, I think the more you do it, it just becomes more of a common practice. There are places where before, I mean, you got to acknowledge all the little things. There's places where before I know I would have been like, well, I'm going to this email. And then now I'll be like, Michelle, you know what? I also notice my body gets warm when I'm about to send that email. If I'm already feeling it and I'm noticing it, let's not hit send. Let's sit on that and see what happens. The more we just get in tune and notice the way our body is reacting, you will start to realize there's all kinds of signals that you can actually take 1 to 2 minutes with before or during. So just start off by just doing some predicting. What are the things I already kind of know tend to happen? Can I start mapping out for myself what it could look like to prepare in advance? And then, every now and then, if you get a surprise and things happen, hopefully you've already started to do the practices enough where they just become ingrained where you can kind of in the moment use it. And if you don't, I'm not going to lie, I still get mad. I still do all the things that I would prefer not to. And that's where the grace comes in, and apologizing or restorative where I needed. But that's where the grace comes in, because it's never going to be perfect, but we can plan for a lot more than we think.
Love it. All right. Well, again, selfishly, I asked a lot of questions, but I think I can speak for the audience out there. We learned a lot. So I think you brought a lot of value to today's conversation. I'd love for you to take us home with any final words of advice to our listeners.
Yeah, I mean, I would just end it by saying, in the place that we're in right now, all of us just to live in life need to have some sort of practices. So I think just figuring out for yourself, just pick one thing, start out with once a day for 1 to 2 minutes, see how it feels, and then just start building from there. Don't bite off more than you can chew. Start very small, and then you can add from there and give yourself grace when that 1 to 2 minutes doesn't happen. You'll get it tomorrow. Start small, and it'll become ingrained, I promise.
There you go. Yeah. That's words to live by. Michelle, if we have some folks that want to connect with you, what's the best way to reach you online?
Yeah, you can find me on my website at michelleseijas.com. And on there, I also have a weekly newsletter. People can sign up for that. And I share a lot of this conversation, stuff that comes up in coaching, whatnot, tidbits for folks to be thinking about. And then you can find me on Instagram at Thriving, and you can find me on LinkedIn at Michelle Seijas.
There it is. Okay. Once again, Dr. Michelle Seijas is here. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you for having me.